Well, good morning. We got started on harvest. We're finished a couple hundred acres of peas. They did okay. They were like 15 bushel peas, but it got so hot. And those things got set back because I think the Spartan washed down in when we got the 2 inches of rain in the spring. So we had pretty good peas really on the worst land on the farm. So that's good. We're cutting winter wheat right now. That's going substantially better, where this stuff's averaging about 30 on recrop with very little inputs anyways, which I'll go through with you guys here in just a little bit. But anyways, I'm gonna let you kind of follow me around the farm today. We're gonna go out and check some cattle that we just moved on to some cover crop, check the nitrates in that quick, and then we'll get on to the farming. So we just turned these cows and calves into this cover crop yesterday, and this mix it got screwed up somehow. We got the wrong mix this spring, but it's got way more brassica crops in here than we normally would like. So there's a lot of turnips and radishes, collards, some forage mustard, I guess. But the bulk of this, or over half of it, is forage peas and oats, which makes a really nice mix because those oats will accumulate some nitrates, but not terrible oftentimes, especially in our system where we're not fertilizing heavy. We probably don't have hardly any carryover nitrate anyways in the soil. And so what I would do when I come out here is look at the manure, and it looks pretty good. They're not overly loose or anything. A lot of that, this is a huge change in diet from the grass they came off of, but a lot of that is the fact that they can access a lot of grass that's attached to this cover crop. And so if you were going to put them into something like this and all they could eat was the cover crop, then you'd be a little bit more concerned, of course, about things like nitrates and stuff. But regardless, this morning I'm going to test this stuff. If anything's going to accumulate nitrates, it's going to be probably the oats, although they're kind of finishing out. I'll test kind of the bottoms of these stems and then the middle of the oat plants. And then we'll check the real nitrate accumulators, are things like the collards or the radishes, because that's kind of their job, is to pull stuff like that out of the soil, lock it up, and then cycle it into stuff that can be used for the next year. So I'm going to test that stuff, and then we'll test a kochia spot. And I'll show you, kochia is extremely good at accumulating toxins and obviously can root pretty deep in the ground. So if we can find a dark green kochia spot, that's where we're really going to find a lot of nitrates. That's also where we got to watch. If we have a lot of dark green kochia spots and we overgraze this stuff and force them to eat that, that's where we lose cattle out in here. So on a side note, if you're looking for nitrate issues in cattle, they're going to act like they're breathing really hard, even though you haven't run them or anything, because it ties up the oxygen in their blood. You'll see watery eyes. If you start to see either one of those things where your cows look like they're really trying to catch a breath, or that their eyes are watering a bunch, that's a sign you better test this stuff for nitrates too. So it's been drought stressed. There's certainly a chance that could happen, but I kind of doubt it's going to be a problem in this stuff where we haven't really fertilized anything on here for quite a few years. So anyways, I'll show you how this works. So if you're going to do much grazing and cover crop or haying or anything that might have nitrates in it, this is a Laquin nitrate tester, or it's LAQUA twin anyways. You can get this on Amazon, I think, for like $300. It allows you to test nitrates right out in the field. It'll give you the actual parts per million, not just some colored thing you have to interpret like some of those other kits. So we have used the heck out of this thing. Our neighbors come and get nitrate tests from us all the time here too. So that would be a real good investment if you're going to be doing stuff like this. So first I'm going to squeeze some juice out of one of these collard plants down here. I'm going to look for the nitrates in it. If it doesn't test high, probably the rest of this is okay, but we'll start there. These little vice grips you can buy off the internet. They're a U-trough vice grip that squishes these plants, and then it will drip the juice out into this channel here. They are way more user-friendly for dry stuff than the garlic press, which we would have almost impossible time getting stuff out of that now. But regardless, it is so dry here now that even these plants with this press, I'm having trouble getting juice out of. So what I'll do, I normally either pour some water over that or wrap it in a wet paper towel for a little bit and then squeeze it, but I don't have any paper towel with me. So what I'm gonna do is just put this kind of in my hand, pour a little bit of my water over it, let it absorb some of that water, and then I'll squeeze the stuff out. I added just a little bit of water to those plants, and then I squeeze this out, and then it'll give me a reading like this. I think you guys can see that, but it says it's 1,000 parts per million. We would kind of expect that if it was for these collards. And so I'm going to do some oats, and hopefully they're more like in the 400 ballpark. For bread stuff, just to be safe, you don't usually want to go above this 1,000 parts per million of nitrate, or you can run into some calf abortion issues and stuff if you do. So I'm going to test the oats. Hopefully they test out fine, and then we'll move on from here and just check it once a week or so. And you can tell a lot when we're in this 1,000 parts per million range. We're not really that worried because there's enough grass and stuff these guys can mix off, and they're good at self-selecting. But if all you had to eat was collards out here, we probably wouldn't put bred animals in here. So on these oats, I'm going to focus on the tops of these plants, because really what these cows do in this cover crop now that it's setting seed is they go along and they eat all the seed heads off and maybe the top third of these oats, and they'll leave the rest of it. So what I would do, just to kind of figure out what kind of mix they're eating, is you go out and you kind of watch back where I was, where they're grazing, and they're not really touching the collards, so we're not super worried about that. But they're eating a lot of these oats and a lot of those forage peas. So we want to make sure these oats, at least in the top half of the plant, aren't high in nitrate, and we should be fine here then. We normally would want to leave this cover crop at this point, let's say for some late fall or maybe even winter grazing, but our deciding factor on this is this field has a lot of prickly lettuce that's came in it and some Canadian thistle. We're going to be forced to fall spray this, so we're going to get over it first with the cows. We obviously don't want to throw them in there after we sprayed it. So we're going to move the cows over this, get them back off of here, leave some decent cover, spray this probably the end of September, and at least we'll have gotten our use out of the cover crop that way. Okay, last spot for a nitrate test. There's always patches of kochia out and stuff, especially cover crop where you don't spray it. But I've got a patch of pretty dark green kochia here. I'll test that. I'm predicting it'll end up probably 7,000 parts per million, but we'll see how it goes. But I just wanted to show you guys why you don't want to just go graze kochia. What's interesting though, is these cows came off of some grass that the protein obviously had dropped quite a bit in. They'll come over and they'll eat this for a while, and then they'll come back out here and go to grazing just oats or grass after that. So they can use this stuff as a protein source. You just don't want it to be their only source because of the nitrate level. Well, it ended up being pretty darn close to what I thought. This stuff came out to 6,800 parts per million. So if they were to just graze that, that would probably easily kill a full-size cow, I would imagine, out here. So we're not worried about it. Like I said, if I'm sitting out here, I spend a fair amount of time kind of watching what these guys graze, and they're right now going along. They're eating all of those oat seed heads, which were only at 300 parts per million or less of nitrates. They'll use this kochia to fill in some protein gap in here. But all in all, as long as we keep moving these guys, or don't leave them in here till all they got left is the kochia, not a problem. If we do that, we'll actually come out. We did that a couple times now, or maybe they got left a little bit too long in the spot, and you'll actually find an animal dead in the middle of a kochia patch. So just a quick learning thing. Not something to be scared of as far as grazing this, because the bulk of this is good stuff, but just don't leave them just to graze kochia. Okay, last thing in this probably overly long video for you guys. First up, these Mahindra Roxors, those things are awesome for this kind of work because they've got little diesels in them. They'll go 70 miles an hour down the road if you want, and stripped down like this, I think this thing was like 15,000 bucks or something. So they run forever compared to a side-by-side. They're super easy to work on because everything's just common, simple parts underneath it, and they don't start fires. That's the biggest thing this time of year when we're out in that stripper stubble, which I do a video on later with the combine. Huge risk of fire out in that stuff. Same thing in this tall cover crop. It's starting to turn brown. These things don't smell like they're on fire all the time. I actually burnt a side-by-side up a few years ago out in strip stubble. So big fan of Mahindra Roxors. We've got a couple of those and they both have been great. They're not built as nice as like a John Deere Gator or something, but super stripped down. Our other one has a cab on it and a heater in it, but it's pretty rudimentary, but it works great for ranch work, and it's tough. And one last thing to mention here, I just left that cover crop that we were sampling. I was just going to show you, we got this fencer hooked up. We now just run 2-wire permanent fence around the perimeter of stuff. This is twisted wire, which is Wendy's idea, which is a good idea. It's just smooth barbed wire, basically. It's easier to handle. A little more money, but it carries current really well. We just staple the wire right to the post. We don't have to use insulators as long as we use all wood posts. But what's happening this time of year is it's getting really dry. And when that happens, you can see where our ground rod is at here. This is a pound in, pound out ground rod, which is super handy to get from Range Ward in Canada. But this spot, we need to come out and wet that down. So we'll bring a water truck out here and just run as much water as we can get it to soak up down into the ground and wet where that ground rod's at. Because if that part's not working right, none of the rest of this fence is going to work right. The ground's the most important part. So hopefully we'll get out here, we'll get that ground wet down, and then that'll solve any of our electric fence problems. And that's it. I'll get on to showing you guys harvest stuff here pretty soon. But thanks for taking the time to watch this. Beautiful day today. We're lucky to have this cover crop to graze as things are starting to brown up, because it's a real high energy, high protein source of feed for these guys when the grass browns up.